Toyota, Nissan, Honda, all making massive profits after the fiscal year 2021 ended. Today, we're going to break down those numbers to see why they were so profitable, as well as take a peek into the very uncertain future. We're going to be hanging out at Automotive News today. They have accumulated all this information for us from the media sites. They do a really good job breaking it down, and we're going to break it down even further. Toyota breaks profit records as it shrugs off pandemic, semiconductor shortage. We're also talking about Nissan after this, as well as Honda. So those are the big three from Japan. Toyota, Nissan, Honda. There are smaller players, as many of you know, like Mazda, Subaru, Suzuki. We don't get Suzuki here anymore. There's also a Isuzu, which we really don't get anymore unless it's like commercial vehicles. But let's dive into this. This has been in the back of my mind for a few days now. I've been traveling, went to Boulder, Colorado to drive the new Nissan Z. Can't tell you about it until Monday morning, but man, it's worth the wait. Anyways, Toyota smashes earnings and they're breaking records across the board with the latest fiscal year announcements, racking in all-time highs for revenue, operating profit, and net income, even as it battled ongoing COVID-19 issues, as well as global semiconductor. And it's not just semiconductors, guys, it's everything. Every material, every product in the industry is on back order, essentially. Nothing is being produced that I'm aware of really at the volumes as it was pre-pandemic. Operating profit for Toyota climbed 36% from 2020 fiscal year, and that totaled a little over $24.5 billion. The previous record was set a few years back, 5 years prior, ending in March 31st of 2016. Operating profit margin was 9.5%, up from 8% the year before. Guys, that is absolutely massive. As we'll talk about Nissan in a little bit, and they go over their operating profit margins. It's way lower, but the good thing for Nissan, they're actually in the black for the first time in a while. Full fiscal year net income increased 27% to $23.3 billion and revenue grew 15% to $257 billion, raking in that dough. All of these are new records for Toyota, and that's due to the 7.6% increase in sales from the previous fiscal year. You got to keep in mind the previous fiscal year was during shutdowns and things like that. So a nice return to form, but they're still not to the volume where they want to be. All these sales numbers are including Lexus, Toyota, Daihatsu, and Hino. And while records were broke this past fiscal year, things are going to be rough, not only for the automakers, but more than likely the consumers, the economies. I hate to be like the grim reaper of joy right now, but things are very uncertain in the world. The only thing you guys can control is how happy you are. So make sure you focus on yourselves and not try to focus too much on the news, even though I talk about the news. Most of the time, my news is very happy, but things are not looking good in terms of the automakers and other things in the near future. So Toyota is not very hopeful here for 2022 fiscal year. Toyota's expecting raw material costs to cost more than double from the total hit last year. How does that happen? How do raw materials cost double in 1 year? Inflation, shutdowns, lack of production. It's just disgusting, but their outlook is further clouded by uncertainty over inflation. I just talked about that, such as markets in the US, lingering semiconductor supply chain woes, pandemic lockdowns in China, as well as ongoing war in Ukraine. It's a lot of things to try to sift through. They don't even really know how to forecast it because there's just too many known issues going on, as well as unknown issues that will happen in this coming year. CFO of Toyota, Kenta Kohn, is saying Toyota will do its best to shelter suppliers from raw material price increases by absorbing the extra costs. The company will also be judicious about passing on the cost to customers through higher sticker prices. While there are some vehicles and regions that might accommodate price increases, other markets and models will not. And since Toyota offers so many vehicles, that is going to be their ace up their sleeve, because they can offer vehicles for every niche, every customer's budget as well. They're saying the company has an offering in just about everyone's price range, even in the era of inflation. So cars are not going to be impossible to get. Should I say new cars? They're not going to be impossible to get in 2022, and don't expect them to be that much more expensive, even though inflation is going crazy, because Toyota knows that could be very, very hurtful to the consumer and possibly their reputation as well. If their profit margin is definitely going to sink this year if they're not going to raise their sticker prices. So they're expecting operating profit to slip to just under $20 billion in the current fiscal year, and net income to about $18.5 billion. So that's about a $5 billion decrease from the almost $25 billion in operating profit for 2021 fiscal year, and about $4 billion less for their net income. What's crazy, even with all this junk going on in our world, Toyota expects global retail sales to expand 3.1%, and they're expecting to sell 10.7 million units for the fiscal year of 2022. That would break their record for all-time sales. 10.7 million. That is incredible. And Toyota almost beat that record last year, I believe, with 10.06 million units. And I think that was their second highest total of all time. In March, Toyota booked a record output for the month of over 1 million vehicles. Toyota said it will not rush in its race to recoup lost production, slowing the pace of recovery from June to April, or April to June, as part of an intentional pause to achieve a more reasonable pace of output as a chip shortage and pandemic continue to crimp the industry. So yeah, things are more profitable than ever for Toyota, but their profitability is going to start sliding here in 2022. Heading to Nissan, fun stuff happening in Nissan. Like I said, I just drove the new Z. Can't talk about it too much. Can't talk about pricing or my driving impressions, but there's a smile on my face. So Nissan is back in the black, but still only at starting line. They have returned to black for the first time in 3 years. This is good to see. We want Nissan to be thriving. We want all these Japanese and Korean automakers. That's just what I talk about. We want all of them to be making money because that money allows them to pour into research and development to make their cars better. And that's a good thing. They have to remind us that if it's been about 3 years since Carlos Ghosn has been, extradited to Lebanon through a suitcase. So yeah, things really took a hit for Nissan once that happened and once he was arrested, really. So it's good to see that Nissan is getting back on their legs here. The rebound underscored Nissan's progress in regaining financial health after a period of management upheaval when it slumped to the largest operating loss in company's history. And for the just ended fiscal year, Nissan erased that red ink as operating profit surged to $2 billion. $2 billion. Remember, going back to Toyota, this gives you an idea of how good Toyota is at making money. Their operating profit was $24 billion. So literally Toyota's making 12 times more money, or should I say they're 12 times more profitable than Nissan is. Absolutely mind-blowing. But it's still a good thing because previously they were in the red, right? So that would mean like Toyota's infinitely more profitable in previous years. So yes, Nissan, please keep making the money. CEO Makoto Uchida's goal is 5% operating profit margin. Hey, if Toyota can be at 8-9%, there's no reason that Nissan can't be a fraction of that, right? Automakers margin finished at 2.9% in the 12-month period, beating Uchida's target of 2% for the fiscal year. There's a lot, and we'll get to those reasons here a little bit. A part of that is like a favorable currency exchange from US dollars to the weaker Japanese yen right now. Uchida is a guy to respect. In 2020, he put his job on the line and saying that shareholders could remove him if he fails to deliver. He's saying the job is only half done. He says, finally, we are at the starting line. Now it's time to deliver greater value and grow the company. Nissan has cut global capacity 20%, trimmed the number of nameplates 15%, and slashed nearly $3 billion in fixed costs. With this past fiscal year, Nissan bounced back with a net income of $1.77 billion, reversing a $3.68 billion net loss from the year earlier. Surging sales and beneficial foreign exchange rates combined to more than offset the soaring raw material costs and one-off costs related to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So even though they're super successful with their profitability, their global sales declined 4.3% to 3.88 million. Remember, Toyota is always hovering around 10 million vehicles, and sales slipped 2% to 1.18 million vehicles in North America, declined 13% to 340,000 vehicles in Europe. Volume in China and Nissan's top market fell 5% to 1.38 million units. Now, while their profitability was just under 3% this past year, Nissan is forecasting a 1.1% while net income increases. So yes, they're still making billions of dollars, but they're not going to make as much money in 2022 fiscal year as they did in 2021 fiscal year. No surprise, steel and aluminum are skyrocketing thanks to lots of different reasons, wars and shutdowns. Net income is seen falling because of a special gain from the sale of Nissan's stake in Daimler, which inflated earnings at just the finished fiscal year. Even though the profitability will go down, their global revenue will grow 19% to $82 billion in the current fiscal year, and worldwide sales are seen advancing 3.2% to 4 million vehicles. So their volume's going to be continuing to increase again now that they have reestablished their foundation as a company. The Carlos Ghosn days are long in the rearview mirror at this point, and they're going to be a completely different company. Also, still speaking of Nissan I's third U.S. plant, possibly for EVs here in the United States. I read this article earlier. It's not a whole lot to talk about, but it looks like before 2030, I know it's a long ways out from now, they will probably have an all-new plant here in the United States pumping out EVs, probably somewhere in the South, anywhere from Tennessee to Alabama. That seems to be where everyone's putting their battery plants and where everyone's putting their EV factories. And Nissan's headquarters is in Smyrna, Tennessee, and their other plant outside of Tennessee is in Canton, Mississippi, where they're going to be producing 2 EVs in 2025, one in Nissan, one in Infiniti. It looks kind of like a little sedan, hatchback, fastback, sort of like Audi A7 sort of sloping design. Pretty cool. Maybe even more similar to the Prophecy concept that we saw from Hyundai that will become the Ioniq 6 this year. So I'm thinking that sort of sedan style, which is surprising, right? You would think that Infiniti would bring an EV, an electric EV to the market first, because that's like their vast majority of volume, right? It looks like Nissan would rather have the Aria and the Nissan nameplate and then under the Nissan brand than the Infiniti brand. And I got the QX55 in the garage. I haven't had a chance to take it out. Hopefully tomorrow, I guess, before I leave again to Austin for the Acura Integra Media Drive. Anyways, just felt like sharing that. Last stop here, though, the last of the big three is Honda. Honda posts higher than expected annual profit, but warns of headwinds, just like we saw with Toyota and Nissan. Honda's been forced to slash production due to shortage of microchips and now face an increase in costs amid China's COVID-19 curbs and the war in Ukraine. Honda is forecasting a 7% drop in annual earnings for the current fiscal year amid higher raw material costs and the ongoing chip shortage. Honda's full year profit was $6.7 billion US dollars, not quite the 23 or whatever 24 billion by Toyota, but definitely an improvement over Nissan, which is around $2 to $3 billion if my recent memory serves correct. Tommy's own projection of $6 billion. So they made an extra $500 million in profit, no big deal. But for the quarter that ended in March 31st, it was a much more meager profit at $1.5 billion. So things are getting more expensive for these automakers here in the first half of 2022 calendar year. Again, global automakers are being forced to slash production due to a shortage of microchips, pretty much thanks to China's zero COVID policy that's just shutting down their entire economy. And also we have the looming war going on in Eastern Europe. Interestingly, they're saying that their profit is going to be $6.3 billion. If you remember earlier, they projected $6.2 billion for 2021, but they actually made $6.7 billion. So their profits are actually not getting hit that badly, or expected to be hit that badly. They're expecting an 11% jump in expenses, which equates to $2.3 billion. Now, Honda's expecting to sell 4.2 million vehicles, and that comes as a surprise to me. I thought they were maybe a little bit smaller than Nissan, but I actually am probably thinking not on global numbers, I'm thinking in Japan numbers, because if I remember correctly, in Japan's domestic market, it's Toyota and Daihatsu selling like the most, and then below that is Nissan, and then below that is Honda. So that's kind of why I think like Honda is a smaller company than Nissan, but when it comes to global automotive sales, that's not the case because they're expecting to sell 200,000 more vehicles than Nissan globally this coming year. Honda is cutting production by about a fifth at 2 of its plants in Japan for the rest of May, a month after it cut production by about half at one of them. They're hoping to get back into business on a recovery track in June. Mizuno said the company was hearing that the lockdown situation in Shanghai is getting better, fingers crossed. They're saying supply chain and logistics in the country were recovering up to about 80%, fingers crossed. But I'm going to end it there. So profitability is going down for manufacturers, all manufacturers, but covering the big ones from Japan, it's definitely going down for them, but not as bad as I thought it was going to be, or not as bad as the headlines made it sound it was going to be. Even though raw material costs are doubling, they're still going to be well into the black, making billions of dollars. And it doesn't look like sticker prices will be effective much at all for the consumer. And the good thing is that these companies offer so many products. They can pump certain products that are more profitable for them, which they have been doing. They've been doing that really well, prioritizing the microchips to more profitable vehicles in their lineup so that they can just make sure that they're making the money that they want to make. I know it's a longer video than normal. I typically don't make these sort of videos that are this long, but I gotta sign out. Thank you so much for watching. Take care of yourselves and peace out.